Okay, for the next lesson, we're going to look at the characteristics of living things. So the child has already looked at living and non-living, and we've really emphasized the idea that Allah is the one that gives life. So now we want to talk about the characteristics that are specific to things that are living, right? The lesson after this is going to be about life and death. So we really want to just make sure the child fully understands living. In elementary, they do kind of understand living and life and death and living and non-living, but maybe younger children, they don't have that concept. So what we're doing with the elementary child is they already have the basic understanding, but now we're going to look more specifically into what those characteristics are that make something living. And surprisingly, the children, they might know that a plant is living, but they don't understand how those characteristics are fulfilled by a plant, the 7 characteristics. So for the first introduction, what we're going to do is we take an animal, and so we're going to, for example, we have the hamster here. You can have a fish, you can have a bird. It's nice that you change. You don't bring the same animal all the time. You can have the cat, right? And or an insect, and then we're going to have slips of paper, okay? And we're basically going to ask the children to observe the animal and to give us different characteristics that they can see the animal is doing. And at the same time, we have to kind of question and prompt them so that they can arrive at all the 7 characteristics. Yeah? So, do you know what the 7 characteristics are? Movement, growth, reproduction, nutrition, excretion, respiration, and that they have sensitivity. Okay? Right? Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for coming to the lesson, Harith and Nasuha. In this lesson today, we're going to observe this hamster, and we're going to see the different characteristics of this hamster. Harith, can you tell me, is this hamster living or non-living?
It's living.
It's living. All living creatures have life because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decided to give them life, and that's why they are living, right? And all things that are living share 7 characteristics. Amongst all living things, they share these 7 characteristics. So let's observe this hamster and see if it's doing anything that can tell us a clue of one of the characteristics. Have a look and see. What is it doing?
It's moving.
It's moving. So living things move. One of the characteristics of living things is that they can move. How does this hamster move?
It has 4 legs.
It has 4 legs, yes. And it moves by walking around or running, right? And sometimes at night it's running on the wheel to exercise. What about a fish? How does it move?
It swims.
It swims. What about a bird, Nasuha? How does a bird move? It flies. So they can walk, they can fly, they can swim. What about a plant? How does the plant move? Yes, in the soil, the roots will move, searching for
Water.
the water and the nutrients. How else can a plant move?
They grow.
They move as they grow, yes, right? And they can move to face the sun, right? Yeah. So all living things, everything that Allah has given life to, moves in one way or another. Okay. Let's have a look at the hamster again. What is it doing with its mouth? Can you see?
It's cleaning itself.
Yeah,
It's eating.
It's eating. All living things eat or drink, or they take in things that are good, that's going to help them grow and be strong. Do you know what the word is for that? Do you know what the word is for food that we eat and drink? Nutrition. So all living things need nutrition. So they move, they need nutrition. So this hamster, what is he eating? I think I can see a sunflower seed. What about fish? What do they eat? Do they eat sunflower seeds?
They eat fish food.
Yeah, they eat small plants or other smaller fish. And right now, when you have a pet fish, it's easier to give them fish food, which is the small plants already prepared. But if it was in nature, they would eat the small plants or the algae or the plankton or tiny fish. Yeah? What about birds? What do they eat?
They eat worms,
They can eat worms.
rats,
Birds eat rats.
and
Which bird is it that
the
eats it?
eagle.
Yes, that's right. The eagle eats rats. What else do birds eat? Yes, they can fish, and they can eat seeds and fruits from the trees, right? What about plants? What do plants eat? Do you know?
Water,
They drink the water. What do they eat? Do you know? What's their nutrition?
the sun,
Their roots will search in the soil for the nutrients, and they'll soak up the water, and they also use the sunlight. And through a process called photosynthesis, they'll make their energy. They'll make their food from the sun and from the nutrients that they take from the soil and the water. Okay? So all living things need nutrition. So, where's the... All living things move. All living thing needs nutrition. What else? Have a look at our hamster. What else? What else can you see? So it's breathing. Yes. All living things breathe. And the correct word for us to use is respiration. Because respiration is the process of taking in oxygen. For us and for the hamsters, we breathe with our lungs. But how does the fish breathe?
they have, what do you call it?
What are they called?
In Malay we call it insang.
Do you know what it's called in English?
Gills.
Gills, that's right. Fish breathe through gills, right? What about birds? How do they breathe?
They have
Lungs. Yes, that's right. They have lungs. Like us, they have lungs. What about plants? How do they breathe?
Plants. They don't breathe, right?
All living things do respiration. So plants, they will take in the carbon dioxide from their atmosphere. They take it in, and then they will release oxygen. That's respiration as well. Different from us, but it's also respiration. Let's have a look at our hamster. I can notice something. Does this cage smell very nice?
Not really.
No, I wonder why it's gone smelly. Does anyone know why it's gone smelly?
Because the hamster's poo.
The hamster's poo. So all living things have to get rid of waste. They eat and they take the nutrients from their food, and then they have to get rid of the things that are not nice, that's not needed for their body. That's called the waste. That process is called excretion. So all living things, they do excretion. Okay, so they move, they need nutrition, they do respiration, they do excretion. What else do they do? All living things. Have a look at our hamster. What else can you see? Do you remember when we first?
It's so lonely.
Yeah?
It needs a friend.
It needs a friend, but it can still live without a friend, right? Can it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if it doesn't have a friend, it won't die, but it will be lonely. So that's not one of the characteristics to make it living, right? Do you remember the first day when we brought this hamster to the classroom? Do you remember how big it was?
Yeah.
It was so small, right? It was a little baby, and look at how big it is now. What happened to it?
It grows.
It grew. So all living things grow. Do you remember the cat, Mocha? How small she was when I first rescued her? She was so small, she fit in my hand, and now she's so big, right? And she's really fat. Why do you think she's really fat?
She eats a lot.
She eats a lot, and
eats a lot.
I think something else is happening. She's really
She's
fat.
pregnant?
I think she's pregnant because all living things reproduce. Reproduce means that they have their offspring or their babies, right? That's another characteristic. All living things reproduce. So they grow, right? And plants grow. The plants are still, first they're small, right? Or they're a little seed and then they grow bigger and they all reproduce. So they have their young. So, do you remember this hamster? It came from Iman's hamster, right? Iman's hamster was the mummy and then it gave birth to these hamsters, right? That's how hamsters reproduce. What about fish? How do they reproduce?
Through eggs.
Through eggs, that's right. They lay eggs in the water and then their eggs hatch and there's tiny little fish, right? What about birds? How do they reproduce?
Eggs as well.
Hmm?
They lay eggs as well.
They lay eggs as well. Well, what about beetles?
Beetles?
Yeah, how do they reproduce? They lay eggs, but what comes out of their eggs? Does a beetle come out the egg?
A bug. A bug.
A larva comes out the eggs, like a little kind of squishy larva, right? And then it grows, and when it's ready, it will go into a pupa to transform into the beetle. Yeah,
Just like the
same,
butterfly.
just like the butterfly, right? They're not born as tiny little beetles and then they grow bigger. No, first of all, they go through different stages, right? What about plants? Do they reproduce?
They do.
They do. How do they reproduce?
By spreading their seeds.
That's right, spreading their seeds. That's why we were collecting the seeds from the tomatoes, right? So that we can plant them and have new tomato plants. That's one of the ways that they reproduce. And sometimes, some of the plants, you can take a little cutting and you can dip it in the soil and then it will grow into a plant of its own, right? So all living things reproduce. We've got one more characteristics of living things. Who can think of one more? Have a look at this hamster. What happens if I tap this? Did you see what it did? Have a look. What?
Reacted to it.
It reacted to the sound, right, of me tapping. What does that mean?
It's very sensitive.
Yes, it can hear and it's sensitive. All living things have sensitivity. What happens when I call Mocha, the cat? What happens when I call Mocha? She turns around and she comes, right? Because she can hear, she's sensitive, right? So all living things have sensitivity. What about plants? Can they hear?
No.
How are they sensitive?
They are sensitive to sunlight.
That's correct. They are sensitive towards the sunlight. They can sense the sunlight and they will turn to face the sunlight and grow in the direction of the sunlight. So these are the 7 things, characteristics that all living things share. They move just like this hamster was moving. They need nutrition. They need to eat something that gives them the right nutrition. They do respiration, right? After they eat, they have to get rid of the waste products, and that they do that through excretion. They start off small and then they grow. They reproduce and they have sensitivity. These are the 7 characteristics of living things. Harith, can you think of something that's living that you love to look at or you love to see?
Horses, of course.
Horses. Can you tell me, how do horses move?
They move, they walk, they trot. They can run fast, they can move slow.
That's right. What nutrition do horses have?
They love carrots
They like to eat carrots
and also dry grass.
and dry grass and apples as well.
As well.
What about respiration? How do horses do respiration?
Their breathing, they use their lungs.
They use
and
their
their
lungs.
breathing is very good.
They breathe from their nose, right? And their mouth. Okay. What about excretion?
Yeah.
Have you ever been to a horse stable when it's dirty?
Yeah.
Very smelly, right? They do really big poos, don't they?
Yeah.
Yes. And how about growth? Do horses grow?
Yeah. They grow very quickly.
Yeah. And they get very big. And what about reproduction?
Yep.
How do horses have young?
They get pregnant.
Uh-huh.
And they will give birth.
They give birth to a small fowl, right?
Cows.
Foal. And then, what about sensitivity? Are horses sensitive?
They are. The touches, the sounds.
When you went horse riding last weekend, was there anything that you saw your horse do that showed that it's sensitive?
Yeah, because there was some people who were blowing the leaves, the dry leaves, so it made a very loud sound. So the horses got shocked.
Oh, really? They got scared.
Yeah.
So your horse that you chose shows us all of these 7 characteristics. Nasuha, can you choose something that you like to see or you enjoy?
Cat.
A cat. Okay. So, do cats move?
Yeah.
How do they move?
With their forelegs.
Hmm?
With their forelegs.
They move their forelegs, but how do they move?
Walking.
They walk and they
Run.
they can jump as well. That's why, and they can climb the trees. What about nutrition? What kind of nutrition do cats need?
Some of them eat fish.
They eat fish.
Their own food. Like whiskers.
Yeah, but what's inside the whiskers?
Fish. Maybe vegetables.
A little bit of
Yes.
vegetables, but mostly they eat protein. So they'll eat things like fish and chicken and meat, right? And then a tiny bit of carbohydrates and vegetables. What about after they eat? Do they do excretion?
Yeah.
How do they do that?
They poop.
Yes, usually they go to the sand or the soil and they'll dig, right?
Yeah.
And then they'll poo or pee in there, right? What about growth? Do they grow?
Yeah. From the small cat to
What do we call a small cat? Do you know?
the kitten.
A kitten, and then it grows until it's a full-size adult cat. What about reproduction?
They get pregnant and give birth.
That's right, just like the horses
Yeah.
get pregnant and give birth. And do they show sensitivity?
Yeah, they get like Mocha, they get excited when looking at the budgies. And also
Yeah, they
when
like
the
hearing the birds and
Yeah.
watching things, yes.
Mocha will sleep when you call him.
Yes, that's right. And what about, there was one missing from there, respiration.
Yeah, they breathe
How do they breathe?
with their nose.
With their nose and their mouth, and they breathe in oxygen into their lungs, like us, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So these are the 7 characteristics of living things. They all move, they need nutrition, they do excretion, they grow, they reproduce, they do respiration, and they are sensitive. Okay? So what I would like you to do is I'd like you to choose an animal. It could be the animal that you just spoke about with me. I'd like you to choose an animal, and I would like you to write down how your animal does all of these 7 characteristics of living things. Right? And remember that these animals, they're only living because Allah chose to give them life. And in order for them to live and to continue living, they do all of these 7 characteristics. This is how Allah created us, that we have these 7 characteristics that we have to do or that we need so that we can live and survive and be living. Okay? Okay, thank you for coming to the lesson. So just like, actually when